All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for being here. So excited that we have Kristen Mallia here today to chat about her design practice. Kristen is an interdisciplinary artist based in Boston, Massachusetts, and Rome, Italy. Mallia's studio practice centers on ritual, collection, and preservation, and for emphasizing material and process-based experimentation. Her self-publishing project, Field Notes, the Index Project, has been in production since 2021. Malia has a BA in electronic media from the George Washington University and a BFA from Corrigan College of Art and Design in Washington, D.C., and an MFA from Boston University. She has been awarded artist residencies in Portugal, Iceland, and Italy, and exhibits internationally with recent exhibitions in Berlin. Ferraria des Cesare. Ooh, okay.
Ferreira do Zazara, I think.
In
I gotta go
Portugal.
through it slowly.
Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, Kristen is an assistant professor of graphic design at Suffolk University in Boston. So thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me, guys. Cool. Thanks for the introduction. So before I logged in here, I did a quick experiment with Zoom to see what sharing video would be like in preparation. And I'm kind of curious, this is such a detail, but in getting started, I so I've structured this presentation a bit differently than I normally do. Normally, I'd use sort of static slides. Um, so I'm gonna pull one of these up, and I'm just kind of curious, like, do we feel like this sort of side-by-side format um, is okay? Is the video too small? What do we think? I can't see what you see.
What are other options?
The other option would be, I think, well, we could have a very sort of weird, terrifying over the shoulder thing. Or I think I can just share, um, or I can just share the video. I was concerned that in an attempt to engage in a dialogue, it might be difficult to, I don't know.
Like if we can't see your face.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, might have been premature to hit record. Let me, my screen has disappeared. Um, I can only see one of my videos. Sorry, guys. Hmm. Am I sharing my screen right now?
Nope.
Okay, great. Um, all right, let me just pull up this video again, and I'm just gonna share my screen, and that will be fine. Um, okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Better. Can you see just the full screen?
Yep. And
Okay.
we can still see you. You're in the top
Oh, you
bar.
can. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. It's really not that big of a deal, but anyway, I will get started. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here. Um, as Josh said, I'm Kristen. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I have a client-based graphic design practice, and I'm an assistant professor at Suffolk University. Just wrapped up a busy week on campus. My work examines ritual collection and preservation through material and process-based research. And I am especially interested in ideas of home as a concept, home sites, and how behaviors and structures accumulate and transform over time. So that leads me to time. Time is an essential element in my work. And as I mentioned, normally I would prepare a very serious script, which I've got a serious script, but And the video is not playing right now, Josh.
It's not okay. Is
No.
that you? That's on
Thank
purpose. Okay,
you.
okay,
Thank
just
you.
checking.
Yeah, I wanted to disclaim first because again, this is going to be an experiment. So time is an important component to my work. And normally I have a script and I have more static sort of traditional presentation slides. But today I thought I'd sort of use this experience as an opportunity to play with time. Each December, I create a video reel that highlights all the work I produced during the year. And this action is both a way of sort of archiving and celebrating my production. Um, so today I have three videos that I want to play for you, each for the years 2023, 2024, and my most recent one for 2025. And my plan is to narrate as we sort of move through the footage. I may pause at moments to slow down time. Zoom may glitch, let's hope not, which will disrupt time. And perhaps at times things will move too fast too. Sometimes I might jump ahead before jumping backwards. So it might take a minute for things within my practice to maybe make sense or for you to catch up. I encourage you to also to disrupt. If you have a question or you're curious about something that's on the screen, or as I said, it's been a long week. If something I say just doesn't make sense, please interrupt and jump in. I would love for this to be a dialogue. Okay. Um, Through these videos also, you may see repetitions, growth, and transformation over time. I hope you do. All right. So to kick things off, back in 2023, I had a two-person exhibition with a good friend of mine named Kirsty Palmer, and the video is playing now, right? All right. This was the first time I had designed a publication that functioned as part of an installation, as an installation element. Kirsty and I are both obsessed with rocks and met during an artist residency at the Skaffell Center for Visual Art in Seyðisfjörður, Iceland at the start of the pandemic. And we were there together for 3 months. In 2023, I was an artist in residence at L'Appartamento Napoli in Naples, Italy. If you've been there, you know that every surface is covered in graffiti and posters are wheat pasted everywhere, especially obituaries. I went there to study urban shrines, altars that are very DIY and built into the rather into the street architecture, the street level architecture. I created a site-specific wheat paste poster installation, which is what you're looking at right now. It served as sort of casting a spell, and the design of it was intended to sort of release things that no longer sort of served me in my life. Um, Another thing you'll see from this presentation is that I love a good time lapse. I feel like it's such a great way for documenting process. Um, so the spell worked, by the way, when I cast it. Other images you see in here, like this one in the background, are instant film shots using just a Fuji Instax camera at the ruins in Pestum, which are Greek temple ruins outside of Naples. And I had brought my Fuji Instax camera with me on this residency after catching a Cy Twombly exhibition at the MFA in Boston like the day before I left. And Cy Twombly had a lot of really incredible lettering work and illustration style paintings with type and lettering. But one of the things that struck me was how many instant film images he had in Italy. This love letter installation eventually transformed into issue 8 of my Field Notes, the Index project, which we will see in a moment. Here it is. For this project, I used antique thread from my grandmother's sewing kit and stitched the binding on my sewing machine. I also spray painted the pages. So again, pulling from all of that material that I was gathering and inspiration walking around the streets of Naples. Um, The publication also comes with a book of matches, so you can cast your own spell by burning one of the page inserts within. I've tabled at multiple formats art book fair, which is hosted by Boston University for the past few years. Here's my table setup. Book fairs, in my opinion, are an incredible way to meet really interesting people. And I don't know if anybody in here has done them before. If you haven't, I encourage you to do it. This year, I had the privilege of tabling with Kelly Anderson. And the year before, I tabled with Brockett Horn, who was there representing the People's Graphic Design Archive, which was really, really cool. I also work with a lot of artists. So this is a zine I designed for a good friend of mine and a Boston-based photographer named Greer Muldowney and Tim Devon. So here we have field notes, the index project, which again, this is a self-publishing project I launched in 2021. It started out as a quarterly. It is no longer a quarterly, but it is something I've committed to since 2021. The project is all about archiving studio practice. So it's an opportunity to experiment with different forms that publishing can take. It's about distributing all of the writing, photography, testing, failing, thinking, making, playing, and exploring that happens behind closed studio doors and also out in the wild. It's a ritual for me. It's a collection to grow over time, and it's a way of preserving my work, my thoughts, and the actions at this very moment. So this issue was site specific. I traveled to Puerto Rico for my brother's 40th birthday, and it was the first time in forever that I had traveled without my computer. Instead, I bought two disposable cameras at CVS, and I brought them on the trip. And on the last morning, I stood on the beach overlooking the water, and I snapped every exposure there. Um, I scanned and processed the film myself, doing it for the first time. So there are imperfections, dust, and sort of inconsistent color. But I thought that made the pages feel really nostalgic and beautiful. And the concept of this was rejuvenation. The idea was that the user of this book would flip through each page, stare at the waves, and then by the end, feel the same sense of sort of renewal that I felt by actually taking 3 days off. Um, so book is performance. Here we transition into cyanotype experiments, which I started doing again when I was in Naples, Italy on residency. Um, so here we see a giant fabric exposure that I created towards the end of the residency. I'm generally pretty obsessed with site specificity. And in this case, I loved that the sun was used to make the exposure. So the direct baking in the hot Neapolitan sun in this particular exact location on this date on this beautiful terrace at Via Mater Dei 73. It felt like a fingerprint. The imagery here was also gathered from the street surfaces, the graffiti, the urban shrines, and the prayer cards I had been collecting. I've been making dirt in my studio for 3 years as a way of recreating landscape. I will talk about this later. I mentioned I love rocks. These ones are hand built from an air dry clay, and I have about 1,000 of them to date. Here I'm tabling at the Boston Art Book Fair at the Boston Center for the Arts. So all of my rock iterations are inspired by volcanic rock and specifically vesicular basalt. So I love the vesicle. So if you're, I forget what it's called, that thing when you have a phobia of tiny little crevices. If you have that, you would not like my work. Um, these are lava rocks in Italy. And then we'll see in a moment some ruins in Italy as well. Rock formations is a series of large stitched rock sculptures constructed from graphite iterations on stone-based paper. Paper is folded, sewn, and suspended, crafting delicate, flexible monuments to moments of time and surface in specific home spaces. Um, I'm curious if anybody in here has worked with stone-based paper before. No? It's magical. So it's made from calcium carbonate. As a result, the surface is hyper smooth, it's waterproof. It really holds sort of mark making, and if you make impressions or you fold the paper, it really holds it. So again, it feels sculptural to me. In the production, they don't use water, bleach, acid, or wood pulp to produce it. So it does often result in lower carbon emissions than traditional paper, which is also interesting. I love that conceptually the rock studies continue through this material, sort of despite their 2D structure. So the fact that it's paper um, pulls you out of that sculptural space, but the fact that it's made out of stone brings you right back in, which I think is really exciting. Oh, and that's the end of video one. All right, let me pull up video two. All right. Okay. And we can see this okay? Okay, great. All right, so now we're jumping into 2024. That was the end of 2023. Um, So here, I think we're already seeing an evolution with the graphite rock formations, I think. So I started to merge the smaller rock forms into larger ones and to use the installation process as an opportunity to embrace spontaneity in the assembly of the work. So this effectively makes each particular formation specific to time, space, and the conditions of their installation and exhibition. I also think about the moon a lot more recently too, and how lava rocks feel so lunar. We'll talk more about that when we arrive in 2025. So Geological Features is a series right here that I've been developing since 2020. India ink with excessive water makes the tracing paper surface that I'm using as a substrate super fleshy and surprisingly rugged. It really sort of strengthens it. And this series continues to evolve as I slowly cut up. I've got about 20 or so of these giant rock paintings. I'm slowly chopping them up and then sort of stitching them back together using my sewing machine. I've also started merging these forms and pieces of them with the graphite illustrations and even clay to try and make more interesting structures. A lot of these pieces, I don't necessarily know where they're going and what they're going to be yet. They're a ritual. I stick with it. I keep going. And then eventually I get to a point where I say, oh, maybe I should do this, or maybe this should change. So most things that I'm showing you, I'm still not totally sure where they might land or what other sort of incarnation will emerge. Um, so this leads us into index nine, which issue nine rather of my field notes project, index 23. And this is really an extension of the graphite rock formations, this particular issue. Often what I'm finding happening is that the work I'm creating results in an installation and then I transform it into a publication. And now maybe that publication then turns back into installation. And that correlation is really direct here, I think. So flexible wall sculpture transforms into publication. A rock is a monument, is a book. This book is a monument, a memory, and a collaboration. So this limited edition issue, all of my field notes are limited edition. It's 58 copies. It memorializes 3.5 weeks that I spent in Scotland during August 2023. And I channeled the construction methods I was exploring with those larger graphite arrangements. So the issue is unbound, and instead it's fixed with a large gold binder clip. And each page is a rock. So I photographed this one rock I fell in love with when I was walking along a shoreline in Fife with some friends. And I broke it down, I chopped it up, I distributed it among the pages. So now it can really be moved around, flipped, and paired in order for the user to create larger sort of rock formations out of the book. It's 94 pages. It's printed on a 100-pound smooth cover stock with translucent vellum inserts. The core concepts that fueled this issue were monuments and memorial sites, privacy versus invasion, hospitality, memory keeping, and geological time. Also, I find that sharing time lapses can really help people understand the design process, especially what goes into some of these self-published works where there are a lot of details and there's just a lot of assembly in there. Plus, they just bring me joy. This installation is called But Mine Alone. In 2022, I lived in a hostel in Provincetown, Mass for a few summer weeks, and the space really became inspiration for a collection of photographs. My research, as I mentioned, is generally centered on this concept of home as both shelter and then landscape more broadly. In this case, a sort of creepy shared cabin vibe quickly became home. And it ultimately became the inspiration for my work during that time. The images are popped into inexpensive gold frames and mounted on the wall with custom designed wallpaper, which channels the bedroom from my childhood home. And then issue 10 of Field Notes became a supplement to this installation and an archive of my experience during that time. So here that is. The publication contains a description of the project supported by quotes from a book I love and look at a lot, Gaston Bachelard's The Poetics of Space. The publication contains a folding tabloid insert and a typewritten receipt. And then it has a little house copy sticker on the cover. And then there's this also this fun little heart clipping there stamped into the front of it. Again, channeling that wallpaper. Um, I joined Sarah Cadigan-Freed's design class at Northeastern University this year and talked about my favorite things, which are rituals, residencies, and rule breaking. Again, I feel like documentation is so important. And it's even here, like being able to sort of share those experiences, I think is really wonderful. Um, In Pompeii, I documented ruins with my instant film again. Actually, I think I had several cameras that day. Um, I also found myself obsessing over the sort of casual resting gestures of so many of these forms. Like these guys on the right, they're just sort of strewn about, but they also just feel like they're just gracefully resting in these spaces, and they're just so beautiful. I also just recently watched Pink Floyd live at Pompeii. Has anyone seen that? Oh, it's so good. So it's a documentary, Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii. It's a 1972 film directed by Adrian Maben, and it's the band performing in the ancient Roman amphitheater in Pompeii. And it's like a typical like live set performance, but there's no audience besides the crew who's filming and working the performance. It's really interesting. So this next bit of footage was shot at the top of Mount Vesuvius, in Naples, Italy. I had hiked up the to the top of the mountain to the volcano and stood over alongside the crater, which was just magical. And there was just all of this beautiful, haunting sort of fog, but then the volcano was steaming and you smelled the sulfur. Really magical. More unique rock formations. Back to these guys. So the rock formations continue with the installation here at the FPAC Gallery, which is in Fort Point in Boston. I'm starting to see more of a correlation between the formations that I'm making with the graphite, and then, of course, direct observation to rocks and landscape from my travels and research, which I think is really exciting. I think I'm getting closer to something with those installation methods. I really do love rocks, in case that wasn't obvious. And on occasion, shells too. Um, so the cyanotype experiments returned in the field. They went from the terrace to the shoreline. Here I played a lot with salt water and sun exposure along the Sardinian shorelines. This is Stintino, which is just a dream. The waters here are so super salty, and you can see all of this was sand and salt for the exposure. And even now, here you can see these salt rings on the surface that are like on them still today. So the Flyleaf Book and Zine Festival is another book fair that I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I absolutely love it. It's a super intimate event hosted by several independent art spaces in Berlin. It's in the Berlin Neukölln neighborhood. It's just super cool. Everybody's really it's just like a really cool culture. I've enjoyed the opportunity to go back there for the past 2 years and share my field notes. It's also been just a really great excuse to hang out with cool artists and experience the creative scene in Berlin, which I highly recommend. So there's documentation from that. Here's documentation of me talking with a graphic designer who I think is so fabulous. I discovered his work when I was an undergrad in design, but does anybody here know Elliot Earls? Okay, he's a good one to look up, guys. He's a multidisciplinary artist and performer. He has a really funky YouTube channel. He's the head of graphic design at graduate graphic design at Cranbrook. And for me, discovering his work was a really big thing when I was an undergrad because I had interdisciplinary interests, and it was the first time I saw a designer actually working in a really interdisciplinary way, printmaking, sculpture, installation. Every year I'm asked to design the in-house promos for Midway Artist Studios host party. I love this project. It's a fun thing I get to do, mostly because I like to make interesting and quirky typographic pairings for it. Um, Here we're transitioning into another Italian installation. So I've continued since that first residency to spend time in Italy. I've continued collecting imagery. Um, so this guy is an extension of that first wheat paste installation, which was called Love Letter. This was Love Letter in Rome. And this was really a transformation of the installation that turned into the publication with the hot pink spray paint and thread. It then transformed back into installation here. It was expanded. This was part of the Radius Collective exhibition in Rome. And it was just really cool to continue iterating on this project. It was at a space called Archimagma. And then for this giant wall where I got to wheat paste inside for a change, it was also sort of finished with the visiting artist Levon Jenkins painting here to bring in some color and add some dimension. All right. And we go to the last video. Hmm. All right. Is this moving for you guys? Sweet. All right, so I mentioned earlier that whole dirt thing. I make dirt. I've been making dirt in my studio for the past 3 years. Um, so we're kicking off the 2025 video reel with a two-person exhibition I had in the fall, um, which was organized by myself and a Boston-based artist and former NASA rocket scientist, Dawn Isles. The exhibition merges our distinct approaches to archiving concepts of landscape through photography, organic matter, and multimedia installation. So, Substratum is the title of this ongoing dirt project. It's a body of work I began on March 27th, 2022, with the purchase of a Lomi home composting machine. I ran my first cycle on Monday, April 11th, 2022, with eggshells, coffee grounds, and paper filters, red peppers, banana peels, used paper towels, vanilla rooibos tea, and lemon. I created a spreadsheet that day and began meticulous record keeping. I maintain it today. The document contains the batch number of each cycle, along with the day, the date of the cycle, the ingredients, and occasionally notes. I fill one 8-ounce glass jar with a metal lid with the resulting dirt, 1 jar per cycle. The rest goes into a big communal bin where I can just sort of dip into it for a bunch of different experiments. To date, I've made mud. I have pressed the wet dirt into silicone baking sheets to try to play with mold making. I've tested it with screens to make paper. It's super pulpy and fibrous, so I feel like it wants to be something really physical and sculptural. I've created little mud balls that are surprisingly really strong. Um, and ultimately, I've reduced it back to crumbles again and funneled into bigger gallon jars. So I create labels with the batch dates using a Brother ML100 electronic typewriter, securing them to the jar's exterior with archival tape. As part of the exhibition, printed pages were stacked on the floor, and oversized prints were printed and hung to the wall. The printed matter provides more context to the viewer, indicating the dates and batch numbers. Again, all of the content from those spreadsheets, as well as ingredients listed for each jar. So the entire installation becomes a sort of bit of information design or like a giant data graphic. You can look at the larger jars to identify a wider range of time for the transformation. The smaller batches, of course, record a very small, specific period of time, one date, 1 week, or thereabouts. Um, Also, Lomi, the company that makes the machine, generously donated a new home composting machine for the exhibition. So I could maintain my home ritual while also having a site-specific collaborative one happening in the gallery. So visitors to the space were invited to donate their kitchen waste and plant scraps to a collaborative composting project that took place in the gallery. And this, I obviously I teach, so I'm just like throwing a lot of like homework at you guys. But this is like a really great opportunity. It's a great reminder that you should always ask for stuff because you just never know. I was really surprised. I mean, I stalked them a little. I sent them like 4 emails and was like, hey, following up, any chance you want to donate a machine? But when they got back to me, they were so enthusiastically on board. They're like, "Where do we send it?" And send us pics, and I was like, "Amazing." So it's just a reminder. It's always worthwhile to ask for things. Um, Anyway, mirroring my process, you can see here everything I do in my own studio. I have a clipboard in my kitchen where I write down the notes before I transcribe them to an Excel spreadsheet. It hung by the machine, so all the ingredients could be recorded. And so all the contributors could be sort of credited for their role as participating artists in this work. I designed also a folding broadsheet which accompanied the exhibition and acted as a takeaway and catalog for the work. So I've been sharing a studio with my partner in Rome since for the past year, I guess. And this last summer, especially, I spent a lot of time handcrafting more clay rocks. So these are not air dry clay. This is fireable clay. So um, uh, I think a stoneware. I experimented with a lot of different colors. And I was lucky to have an artist in the neighboring studio volunteer to fire them for me, which was fabulous. So some of them are fired, others I've left bone dry for additional experiments. So on the island of Stromboli, I started conducting some field tests with the raw clay rocks called attrition. So I would place the bone-dry clay rocks on the shoreline, allowing the salty waves to slowly dissolve them. I'm really interested right now in this cycle of construction and destruction with the clay. And the video carries a sort of glitchy videotape aesthetic, which to me evokes old family home videos and warm nostalgia. Here we have some of my rocks in the volcanic landscape on the island of Stromboli, set against black sands on volcanic rock. Stromboli is a Sicilian island, an Italian island that is approximately 45 miles north of Sicily in the middle of the Tyrrhenian Sea. It's like 5 square miles in area. It's not big, but it is an active volcano. So I also hiked the volcano and was able to see this magical lava spewing, which was like the dream. I also think there's a clip in here of the film Stromboli, which was directed by Roberto Rossellini and stars Ingrid Bergman, one of the hot nights in Rome before I left for the island. But it definitely was the thing that solidified my need to go. Slowly segueing into my most recent artist residency, which, as Josh mentioned, was in Portugal in Ferreira do Zezera. Um, we're getting to that footage in a minute, but it's about 2 hours inland of Lisbon along a gorgeous river. And during the 2 weeks, here it is. During the 2 weeks I was there, I made the work you're seeing here. One of the things I was really excited about was that my sort of approach to the clay vesicles shifted from being like exclusively focused on like round sculptural rocks and instead shifted into these sort of flatter tile-like surfaces. Portugal is, of course, known for their tile production, so this transition was logical. But I really got excited about the sort of strong lunar vibes. And I was working with this beautiful pasta gorda clay and this porcelain. It was just magical. So I ended up sculpting about 13 of these tiles and then another 60 rocks. And then I experimented a lot with surface. So I tested a lot with different liquids for their ability, like here, to dissolve the actual surface of the clay and deteriorate it. And then I also conducted some glaze experiments on the lunarscape tiles, manipulating the glaze recipes to sort of increase blistering and pinholing and crazing, things that you normally see as flaws or don't want. I was like, give me more. And then afterwards, I would continue sort of chipping away at the glaze with tools to sort of pop some of the air bubbles and create even more sort of texture in the surface. Again, all of that magical time lapse. I also developed a project called Archival Document, which we'll get to in a second. You'll probably recognize some of the text from that from my dirt exhibition. So here we are, the dirt exhibition and my record keeping for that. For this project, I rolled out clay to create sort of paper sheets, and I applied designs I applied my designs, which were printed on a fireable decal transfer paper. So here you can see the time lapse of the application process, which is a bit like applying like just a regular decal or a temporary tattoo. And then they were fired in the kiln, and the ultimate form is this sort of archival deconstructed book, which I'm really excited to continue exploring. Rock Flats continues with the sort of surface studies from this year, channeling theatrical stage flats, which are large flat pieces of scenery used to create the illusion of context and depth. These pieces form a rock wall, a dividing line, a boundary, a site to examine. And the whole idea is this sort of facade, which references the memory of a place or a pristine landscape, while the backside exposes the illusion of it as being complete. These were built for a recent Radius exhibition collective exhibition at UMass Lowell. And as part of my exhibition, I also designed my 11th issue of Field Notes to serve as a supplement and a takeaway to this particular installation of work. And the issue contains site-specific photography, illustration, and writing. And it has a cool 3-inch holographic sticker on the cover. Um, Here, I think we've got a GIF or GIF, if that's how you roll, of my presentation as part of that. The artist talk just showing some of my Icelandic research. Here's another house party promo. And then heading into one of my longest standing clients here is the Paris Restaurant Group. They opened this year, Bar Lunette, and I had the opportunity to develop everything from logo and overall brand voice to print collateral and interior design. So I got to make pretty much all of these decisions around color, paint, wood finishes, lighting, hardware, decorations. I procured a lot of the decorations and sourced them myself, which I'm a collector, so hunting secondhand shops and researching for cool finds to sort of complete the look was something that I was excited to do. Um, and then this documentation, of course, shows the day we installed some of the vinyl signage into the windows. Um, Another year, another flyleaf, building relationships, memories, and experiences is another form of collecting. I also had the chance to present my work at a fireside chat, participate in workshops, which was really nice. If you're interested in book fairs, this is a really great one for like a first time experience. If it's something you guys are curious about, let me know and I'll tell you about it, send you info. Um, and then here we head into the final stretch of this video, which is me assembling my latest issue of Field Notes, Index 25. It's issue 12. I used a big coil binding machine that I've had in my studio for ages. I finally used it. The coil for this one is red. You'll see the aesthetic here of the publication definitely leans heavily into those sort of otherworldly lunar landscapes. And the issue is site specific to the residency in Portugal. So it really is a way of presenting the 3 bodies of work I created during that time. It also feels a bit more personal just because I paired a lot of original photo, illustration, and process notes and text with actual photographs, like snapshot style of me there hanging out, like just sort of having an actual human experience to counter the sort of actual production. Um, and then it's embellished with text excerpts from the NASA website about the moon's surface. Um, and then as we exit the time lapse of production, we end with more rocks. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kristen. What? Well, I'll let everyone else ask questions in a second, but why rocks? Like, what about them? Or when did this start? How did you learn that you liked rocks?
It started with Iceland. Or it started with Iceland in 2020 when I was there. I would basically walk around the fjord every day, hike along the water, and there was like this, especially this one sort of shoreline that was like black sand, and it was just all of the small volcanic rock, and I was like in love with all of it. And there was just something about it. And the whole experience there, I was there in the dead of winter. So it really feels like you're on the moon. And there was something so otherworldly and overwhelming about the whole experience. For legitimately 3 months, I just walked around in awe. And so I just immediately had this like driving compulsion to sculpt them, which is why I've been working with air dry clay because I was in an isolated space and my studio mate was like, "Oh, well, I've got a bag of like a couple bags of air dry clay if you want to work with it." And it's not like we were in a place that had art supply stores. We had to travel for them. So I just started building and experimenting and I couldn't stop thinking about them. And then there were a whole other series of things. Like shortly after I left the fjord, there was this really catastrophic mudslide, and a lot of the area was like destroyed. So then it was like this conflicted conversation I was having in my studio about whether I should be feeling so inspired by these forms when there was all this destruction. And um, it's also interesting to like I write a lot as part of my studio practice. And one of the things that is so interesting is that just as time passes, I realize how rocks have actually been like my grandmother collects rocks, like
Mhm.
my family, like we always like built rock walls. It's when I travel, I always bring my grandmother back a rock still, like, and she's excited about it. Like, we just love them. So I'm like, maybe it's in my blood too. And then this summer, I went to Sicily to trace my family history, which is in Modica, Sicily, and it is a city village, literally built of rock. Like, uh, it's like a giant, like everywhere you're just climbing upstairs forever because you're climbing up rock walls. So I was like, maybe it is part of my who I am, my DNA.
Nice. All right, other thoughts, questions, comments?
Do you like astronomy?
Astronomy?
Yeah,
I mean,
I bet you do.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The thing I came up with, like, I'm from Bangladesh, and in my country, there like my grandfather was like really enthusiastic with rocks, and he had like five rocks of different. I don't know what the names, but different colors like blue and uh, his thought was about that about certain astronomy or something like these certain types of like some are used for like good luck, some are used for like preventing
hmm
bad luck or something like that. So yeah, interesting. And another thing is question is like I will call you a geologist as you work with soil and other stuff like so working with natural elements and like as a designer how you like how you like came up with the idea like you like rocks so you design or your works are related to your works like I may like somewhat something like different so how I may have the confidence to like go with it that my topic is that and I should follow to it how I build the confidence in that.
Oh my God, just do it. Yeah, I feel like so I thank you for your comments and questions. I feel like um I feel like it's the best way to sort of paralyze yourself with any kind of work or making is to think about its final form. Stop. Don't do it. Abort. Like, I think the most important thing is to just do what feels right and go for it and consider everything an experiment, consider everything just a test, it's process. There's no pressure about where this lands. And like I said, there are a bunch of things in my studio. Like, when I first started sculpting rocks, I was not thinking about where they were going to go. Same thing with my field notes. Like, I don't know what this is going to turn into. I just know I need to stick to it. The first batches of dirt, it was like, are you really buying this expensive machine to commit to making dirt? But I was like, no, it feels right. And like to answer your point more directly, like for me, the conceptual tie-in was I was already thinking about landscape and places that I considered home sites. So when I was making the rocks and reassembling them or collecting videos and putting them together with these rocks, it was a way of recreating my memory of a particular landscape. So it was actually a friend of mine who started talking about, hey, I want to get a composting machine. I found this thing. And then I couldn't stop thinking about dirt. And I was like, that's an even better way to think about recreating landscape. And so I did it. And now I've got, I mean, my studio is just filled with rocks and dirt. But at the end of the day, the collection's growing. And I feel like now it's getting big enough where, there's power in numbers. So it's like if you do a lot of something over time, eventually it becomes a big enough thing where I think you don't have to justify it, you know? So I think just like doing what feels right and experimenting and just trusting the process, I think usually leads to something good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
In your I guess I don't know what to call it, maybe interior design or your like finish out for that, what was it,
The
Paris
bar.
restaurant? Yeah. Would you, I guess, like, would you say sort of maybe it's a little different with that because they're like a client expecting like an end result sort of thing, and I'm sure they probably want like some, finished thing that they have like in their idea, right? So like where do you like let creativity drive like the first half maybe, and then like the,
Mhm.
oh, I have to like deliver something the second half, right?
Well, I think, I mean, with client work, it's a little bit different because yes, you are being brought in to complete a specific task. But But also, I think most things you're designing a framework. You're designing a set of rules. And the idea is that the rules you're setting, like that's where like you can really push how you're getting creative with the rules and how sort of generative those rules can be. Like how can you do something interesting within that sort of set parameter? And I actually like the way we've sort of defined this sort of French dive bar with like a touch of like Wes Anderson meets vintage optics shop, right? And so the idea for like the type, like I defined, okay, this is the type of artwork. We want these kinds of metals. We don't want these things. We want this kind of art. We don't want to do this. We saved a lot of actually the stuff from it used to be an optician shop. So that's why they named it Bar Lunette. And that's why we went with this very optical theme. But we saved a lot of the old stuff from that shop as a way of sort of again, honoring the history of the space and of the business that came before. But by defining all of those sort of rules, now like they're still continuing the collection that I began. Like I was hunting around stores in Boston and finding things that I'm like, these are the kind of things. And now it's just become even more generative. Now they know what they're looking for. The space is filled with a lot of funky stuff and it's like really cool. So I think just like, it doesn't have to be a fixed static thing. It does need to be defined, but all the work I do too, I set some rules and then it's like, okay, how do you go wild within there?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I get caught up on that with like clients that I have and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's interesting to hear. I'm also Sicilian and I do like
Ah,
rocks.
nice.
Maybe not as much as you, but I appreciate rocks a lot. So
I mean, I'm sure it's not just people from Sicily, but
yeah,
that's cool. That's funny. Thank you.
yeah, you too.
Any other questions or thoughts on anything?
What did
Um,
you study in your high school or undergrads that you know like so scientifically about the rocks and how you treat them during your work process?
Well, I will say I wish I could call myself a geologist, by the way. Not definitely not. I'm an artist, I'm a maker. I but I'm always trying to learn more. And so the before I maybe didn't know anything about rocks. And then of course, once I started realizing like I was really interested in specific types of rock forms, I've slowly over time um researched it. And, one thing, like when you're making work and you've got an idea, like opportunities like this, trying to figure out, okay, how the heck do I want to talk about my work? And especially like because my work is obviously there are a lot of prongs here. It goes in a lot of directions. It's like, how do I logically put all this together? Um, but like as you're preparing to talk about your work, like it's all kind of cyclical. And then it's like, okay, well, I need to talk about this. So what actually is volcanic rock? And spending time there. There is like this geology podcast. I don't really listen to podcasts, but man, there's this geology podcast and there's this one like episode on plate tectonics that it just calms me and I'm obsessed with it and I listen to it all the time. So it's like a slow chipping away. But I'm like hyper aware of all the things I do not know that I want to know. And I'm just, I try to like just keep doing that research. I find that writing about work is really important. It's really important for me. I try to write for 10 minutes every day. And a lot of like it started when I was in grad school for design and I just started an InDesign document and I'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna like talk about what the heck this one project is that I'm doing, or I'm gonna paste a bunch of resources that I found today, or this cool article about the Neapolitan tufa in Naples that they use to build the architecture. It's all volcanic. Just funneling all those things in and that's sort of creating a little sort of weird library of resources and reflections that I can also dip into over time. Um, so I find that helpful, but I just try to absorb, I try to be a sponge. But it's also okay to like not be a geologist about this. I am a visual, like I'm a maker, I'm an artist. I'm trying to create something or recreate something. So there's no rule that says I have to be factual about it. Part of this is emotional too. And a home site can be anything, memories or can be total lies, right? So I think it's interesting that it can be flexible too. But I also don't want to be like sound like a total idiot. I want to know about the rocks. Thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was curious. I feel like designers often don't do residencies because they are
Mm.
like not very targeted towards designers. I'm curious, like, what draws you to that experience, and then I don't know, advice for not for designers trying to get into those places.
Yeah. Um, well, I think so for me, like prior to grad school, like I had a sort of weird wandering slow path to figuring out exactly what kind of artist I was going to be and have all the pieces of my education and everything fall together. And in my last semester in grad school, I took an installation class and that was like this like really it became this transformative thing for me where I suddenly understood how graphic design and my sort of fine art interests could actually live together and how they could merge. And so that semester, like I remember just immersing myself in like the sculpture grad program and the painting program and attending all the lectures and hearing from all sorts of different artists, not just designers, although I attended those too. But some of what I started learning about was residencies, and I was like, oh my God, like going someplace and just working and doing research and getting to be someplace else is like the dream. I want to do that. So I asked a lot of questions to the faculty and to people who I knew were doing it, and they weren't designers. And a lot of people were really generous and just sort of sharing their thoughts on things. But there's a website called Res Artists, And that's like a really good resource for residencies. I think there's like some sort of approval process. So like there's sort of like it's like a legitimacy thing. Like you can go into the database, you can select if you're looking at specific countries, if there are specific types of residencies. And, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of bookmarking. I do a lot of like click deeper, 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 and then you're like 2 hours later, where am I? But I feel like as a result, you find a lot of stuff. And so I usually just sort of do a lot of reading. I'll also look to see what artists have participated in
Mm.
residencies in the past. Or on the flip side, I will look at the CVs of artists and designers who I really respect, or artists that I follow, and I'll see what residencies they've done. And then I'll sort of work backwards and say, oh, this person that I love their work, I love what they're into. They did these residencies. And sometimes I will also reach out to them and like DM them on Instagram and be like, or if their emails on their site and be like, hey, I'm looking at this residency and I'm kind of curious about it. I see that you did it. Do you recommend it? What do you wish you knew before you went? And people are usually like, I've made a lot of cool friends that way, actually, who like, we are friends now, friends who haven't met, but it's like really lovely. It's a great way to connect and it's a really good way to get information. Um, and I think, depending on what you're trying to do, for most residencies, you submit a proposal. And the biggest thing is why this particular location? It's not like, okay, I don't care where I'm going, just get me out of here. It's like, oh no, I want to be in this fjord because I want to do this kind of experiment. And this is, doing a little bit of research around why that area, what it has to offer. And I think the stronger the connection, like when I went to Italy for the first time, Naples, I wanted to go to research the urban shrines and altars and sites of worship. Like, so of course, I'm going to go to a place that has like 4 billion churches and like all of these shrines in the street. And so building that sort of why is a really big one. But I will say, like Josh, like residencies are the greatest thing ever. My first one completely transformed my life, my perspective, my work. It was just like a really massive energy shift. Residencies are also designed to support artists that, it's not like you have to go and have a big exhibition after, although I try for that. And it's not like you have to necessarily produce. Some you do. But others are like, no, no, no. This is slow. This is reflection. This is rejuvenation because artists can't be creative when we're burnt out, or we can't be as creative if we're
Yeah,
burnt out.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
really helpful.
cool. Thanks,
All
Josh.
right. Anyone else? Or we let Kristen get to her weekend? Okay. All right. Thanks, Kristen. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And we'll see you in like a month on campus.
I can't wait. Oh my God. First time in Texas. Yay.
Yay,
So nice
indeed.
to meet you guys. Also, I know it's a minute till we see each other, but feel free to connect, guys, if there's anything else you didn't ask or if anything comes up. I'm happy to keep talking, okay?
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.